Okay, welcome back to BarryT's Garage. I am going to get an education on superchargers and flatheads. And I'm going to bring you along and we'll learn together and see what we can find out. All right, I'm here with Steve from CPE. And Steve, let's start off finding out what CPE is. What do you do?
Oh, good morning, Barry. CPE is the name of my company, Coppock Performance and Engineering.
Okay.
We started the company up about 3 years ago to build supercharger kits for Ford Flathead V8 engines.
Right on.
And the design is based off of Joe Abbins' design from about 30 years ago. Uses intake manifolds specific to adapt the flathead to the supercharger, and pulleys and brackets and what is needed to adapt everything to the flathead V8 engine. Joe designed this about 30 years ago, about 300 worldwide, and I was fortunate enough to license his design about 4 years ago.
Right on. And look who just happened to show up while we're filming. It's Joe. All right, I have Joe Abbin here. He brought his beautiful car with us. Joe, we're going to get into some technical things and engineering things, but let's start off with a little walk around your car. Tell me about this car, first of all.
Well, this car had been a drag car, but very rough cut, that I bought in the Kansas City area in 1991.
Okay.
And it previously had a 327 Chevrolet in it, and early Ford drivetrain, and it had a crude chop, and it had no filler in the top, and it had the fenders welded to the body. And I don't know where I found the allure or why I had some brain fade and decided to take this thing back to Albuquerque. It was such a good deal. And one of my friends saw it and said, "Whew, that's a piece of crap."
And when was that? How long ago was that?
That was 1991.
Oh, wow.
So by 94, I actually had the thing on the road. And my last flathead that I'd owned was 1961. So that was a long time ago. And I had it in a 40 Ford, and it was a gasser. It started out as a C gasser. Then they made a special class for flatheads, G gas, and then it became an X gasser. And so, and I couldn't wait to get rid of my flathead then. You know, even though it ran good, it ran with the 57 Chevys and the cars of the day. It was, it had some great classic speed equipment on it, normally aspirated. But all the magazines had deals on how to do a swap of Cadillac, an Oldsmobile, a Chevrolet, a Chrysler, you know, whatever. And so I got caught up in that, and I couldn't wait to get rid of my flathead. Then 30 years later, I thought, geez, you know, I'm a lot smarter now, and I have more resources. What happens if I did it right?
Yeah.
And because I remembered I liked the sound, and there was a lot of things that was charming about it, and the idea. It seemed odd that an old Ford and an old Ford engine and an old Ford car would be unusual after a while in the hot rod world. And I thought, well, I'm going to try it out, so I did, and I started out and built the first engine that I put in here, and gosh, it ran very well. It ran around 100 in the quarter, around 13 seconds, something like that. So, and it ran surprisingly well, and people said, "Wow, that's a flathead and does that." And I'd redone my friend Steve Lair and I redid the chop, filled the top, and my little joke is that top has the perfect contours. It came off of a 57 Chevy Nomad. So I bought the Nomad and cut the top off.
Oh, did you say that out loud just then?
Actually, it was due to go to the crusher, and there was nothing salvageable on it.
All right.
But we did use a battery-powered nibbler and cut the top off that Chevy, and it makes, you see, it has the perfect contours.
It does have a beautiful shape to it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It has the rounded stuff. Some of the other tops that people use come out flat.
Right.
Or they have ribs or something, but this it just fit perfect.
That is fantastic, Joe.
Yeah, and we redid the chop so that it was the same on both sides of the car. And it turned out really well. And at the time, I ran it without fenders for, oh gosh, maybe 10 years, save weight. But then the 34 was always a beautiful car because they have the flowing skirted fenders and all that. They're Art Deco to the max, you know.
Right.
In fact, I had heard, but I've never been able to verify that the Tiffany Award for the most beautiful machine in 1934 was the 1934 Ford. And but I could believe it. It's swoopy.
Yeah.
They're just a
nice
pleasing
design.
looking car.
Yeah.
And then over the years, I just developed things, and after running the original engine for about 10 years, I learned a lot, and I thought, you know, gosh, that's as well as it ran, I could do better.
Okay.
And so I thought, why not? And so we built another engine, which is this engine that's in here now.
Oh, right.
And at the same time, I acquired an engine dynamometer. So I have, it's kind of a hobby business, this engine dynamometer in Albuquerque, and I have a partner on that. And gosh, we got that thing. It made 335 horsepower and 365 foot-pounds. You know, it was, everybody says, wow, I didn't believe they could do that with a flathead on gas.
Right.
And you could drive it on the street. There's no exotic equipment in here. It has stock Mercury rods, stock Mercury crank. They're all prepped and
Sure.
inspected. Good stuff. The Iskandarian cam. And I thought, well, the key to making this flathead, which doesn't like to breathe,
Right.
is you just blow hard down its little throat. So I thought the Supercharger would be the ticket. And there was not a lot of blown flatheads around.
Right.
But Speedway had a kit, so I bought one. But it was very rough and needed a lot of work, and it worked great. But then Camden went out of business. Later on, I thought, gosh, there's a lot of other people who were interested in this, making their flathead run like a modern car. And I found Ryan had an equivalent blower, B&M had an equivalent blower. And so then I had to do a manifold myself. And that's what I did. So I developed the kit, and actually in the end it sold 350 Supercharger kits for a flathead Ford. I sold more for a flathead Ford than Wyan had sold for a small block Chevy of all
No
things.
way.
350 of them. So I see my kids all over the place.
Right.
And they really work. The major difference, and the other engine though that was in there, it was a fine running engine,
Yep.
but not up to the standards of this one. So I put it in my 50 Mercury, and I've been driving it. So it's been on the road in the 50 Mercury for 25
Wow,
years.
so you still have it on the road now?
Still on the road now. It's
Wow.
accumulated 6,000 miles with no service. This is not that much. It's 2,000 or 3,000 miles. But lots of drag strip runs. The ship in there is 5,800 RPM. People think that's high. Well, it's a stock crank, stock rods. They're not as wimpy as some of the competition would like to make them out
That's
to be.
right. That's right.
Henry, you know, skimped on some things, but those rods, the skinny looking spindly things, they're rugged. And at the World's Fair in 1933 or 34, they twisted one 360 degrees and hung a car from it to show how strong those things were. It's had no issues, and it's been shifted at that 5,800 maybe 1,000 times.
Wow. I mean, those drag strip miles, those are hard miles.
They're hard miles. And some people say, well, this is just a disguised race car. Well, it is built to do what it likes to do, which is go straight. However, I do drive it on the street. It goes to poker runs and short range tours. I'd change a lot of things if I was going to drive to Los Angeles. The other thing that it's got because I bracket race it, it has an automatic transmission. It has a C4 automatic.
Okay.
And with a high stall converter at 2,400. People say high stall converter and flathead, that didn't go together. It's a low RPM engine, but it loves it. And this engine likes to, with the blower, it'll go clear to destruction if you don't put a...
You're not floating the valves to get it to stop, are you?
No, that's true. And yeah, if you do float them, they don't go anywhere. They don't hit the piston. And it has a 9-inch rear end with a Detroit locker in it, 411. So this thing really hooks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking when you get it. It's 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, which is supercar territory.
Yeah.
It'll blow off my own Roush Mustang, a supercharged Mustang. Blows off my neighbor's Z06, his 575 horsepower Z06. It blows off his Viper. Part of it is it's a lightweight car.
Right.
Even with all the fenders and hood and everything else on it, it weighs 2,540 pounds.
Is that right?
And then you put a fat driver in there and it gains another a couple hundred pounds.
Get a little more traction.
Yeah, if I should sit in the back seat. But I wanted a rugged drivetrain.
Okay.
Because you can launch hard and
Yes.
without breaking things. And the old 39 box and the original rear end, and the old days with my gasser, I had about a 50% mortality.
Yeah.
And but I didn't know how to do any better. I didn't have any welding skills, and you could question my other skills too.
Yeah, right. Is this a Mercury block or?
It started out in life as a 1950 Mercury block, right?
All right.
And it has the stock pan, which is a nice item. Steve has one on his engine back there. It has the sump in the rear, which fits an early Ford.
Okay.
I was always mad at Ford when they went to the Y block. They put the sump in front, which makes it a difficult swap into an early Ford.
Right. Yeah, they made it
Arthur
hard.
Stuntoff, the smart guy, did the Arden heads and all that. He convinced Chevrolet to make that small block fit in an old Ford.
Yeah, right. That's where it all went crazy. Right
Yeah, it all went nuts. And
so now, what is that engine? If just a good stock engine like that, what without the blower?
yeah,
What would that look like horsepower wise?
the stock, the 1950 was 112 horsepower.
Started with.
horsepower, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's incredible what the Flathead, because of its restricted breathing, it really loves supercharging. That supercharger was started out in life as a B&M 174.
Okay.
Then Hawley bought B&M, the blower line. Then they produced it under the Wyan name, and it was sold by Hawley. So that is a
So that's kind of the lineage of it, huh?
yeah, and they are all two lobe. In fact, here's a.
Okay, yeah.
So
Let's
this
get
is
into
this
a
is
little bit.
representative of the two lobes that are in that blower.
Okay.
And it's very simple, not necessarily the most efficient, but it's economical to manufacture and works pretty darn good.
All right. Well, this gives us a chance to learn more here with the pieces out here. That Steve
Yes,
got
let's
for
look
us.
at this. So here's one of those blowers
Okay.
that's in there. This is not exactly a twin, but it's the same size internals as the one in the Motorhead Mart Special.
Okay.
There. And you can see, you can look in there and you can see the it doesn't have the pulley on there, so I can't turn it.
Right,
But
that's-
anyway, here's
that's really that
here's what
right
the
there.
rotors look like there. And when Hawley bought Wyand and the B&M blower line, they didn't buy B&M the company. They bought the blower line. They really did use top drawer equipment and got better fit, finish, bearings, seals, everything really.
Okay.
And then here's the manifold that I did for the Flathead. It's low profile. It's only 2 inches tall. And so
Yeah.
that allows it to fit under the hood even under cramped conditions like the 34.
Yeah, it's not even, you're struggling to fit in there, is it?
No, it's not. I had to use a drop-down air cleaner when you put the.
I see.
That's a 600 CFM Hawley double pumper on there.
Okay.
And people think, well, that's a lot of carburetor. Even the two carburetors is too much for a Flathead. I says, it depends on the Flathead.
Right.
If you want one if you have one that's that can breathe and put out the horsepower, it needs to have air. In I have a customer, Bert Griffin from California. He's my champ. He's had 3 engines in there, and they've all made 350 horsepower.
Okay.
So they use an 830 CFM Hawley 4-barrel on it. Everybody says, "Oh, that's ridiculous on a Flathead." No, it's not.
If you find one thirsty enough.
That's right. Yeah, that's and the manifolds started out cast. They were cast.
Yeah.
But then the trouble with the castings were the outfit that did the patterns and stuff, they also procured the castings for me and then machined them. But the trouble was they had all these different vendors, and each of the manifolds came out like your kids. They're all different. And so I was able to go to an all CNC machine manifold, and then Steve and Dion Casto in Nevada City, Texas, actually refined the design a little, made it a little easier. A machine, and you can see the ports and everything are very simple, rounded,
But by using CNC, it's going to be precise, and everyone's going to be the same.
Everyone's going to be the same, and they fit.
Right.
These fit better than the factory manifold.
Yeah, look at that.
And there's what the bottom looks like.
Right on.
And so the rest of it, the pulley drive system, the one belt system with the 6 ribs is not that traditional, but if you look at it from the side, it just looks like one belt. So it doesn't strike your eye as something modern.
Right.
And use the 6 rib belt is equivalent to 4 V belts.
Really?
Yeah, so you can transmit, it takes a lot of horsepower to run these blowers. In fact, in the Motorhead Mart Special, what is horsepower and out there, it takes 50 horse to run that blower.
Wow.
And a 1-inch belt will transmit that much power.
If it's got all those ribs in it.
Yeah, and it's very efficient, and it allows the front of the thing. I tried to design it so that the symmetry of the flathead was preserved.
Right, you've got the 2 water pump pulleys.
The 2 water pump pulleys, yep.
Okay.
And this is an automatic tensioner that's commonly things just been polished here. And I made my own bracket here, and there's several different alternators you could run there. I'd like to run a more traditional looking generator, but there's not that much space.
Not a lot of room for that.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of room. And alternator has been around a long time.
Yeah,
so
it's been a while now.
It's not that bad. This is stock factory cover there.
Yep.
They only made that in 1 or 2 years, 1950 and 51, the aluminum, but they polish up very nice.
It looks great. So that's actually a factory.
This is a factory part.
Aluminum.
Right. And on that car, I use a Mallory distributor. This is an E-Fire made by Stromberg, I believe. Yes. And this is all electronic. But I have had great success with just plain old points.
Okay.
And it's over. I've got a old Sun machine that I had to bring back from the dead, but I can set up the distributor on it. And
nice.
And it's good to the 6,000 RPM. And
well, that is great. And I happen to notice that you have an idler here to get a good wrap around this pulley.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, and that was similar to what they had to begin with, but it had a spring. The idler was on a spring-loaded deal. In fact, that engine has the stock idler spring deal, but that one also doesn't drive the water pumps.
Okay, yeah. So this is a different setup.
Yeah, it's a different setup. And
okay,
this car is so cute. And this is what they call a 142 blower. And what that 142 refers to, it's 142 cubic inches per revolution.
Okay.
So that's where, when somebody says it's a 177, a 174, or a 142, something like that, 256.
Okay.
That's what it is.
It's really a comparison of air volume.
Yes, it is. It's a volume per revolution.
Okay.
And it turns out there's an optimum size positive displacement blower for every engine, and it's about a half. If the blower is about half to 3/4 the cubic inch displacement of the engine, it's just right. You'll get good performance over the entire range. If you put too big a blower on there, the characteristics are such that it'll overpressure it at the high end, and you have to underdrive it significantly, and it'll actually run better without the belt. People have a hard time with that. But I specialize in blower systems, not just for flatheads. But that's one of my customers wanted a 1471 blower, and on that one, that's a diesel reference.
Okay,
not the cubic inches. And then in that particular deal, he had a 502 cubic inch engine, but that's way too big even for his 502. He had to get up to 4,800 before it'd run better with the belt on than it would without the belt.
the belt's taking more horsepower than it's adding, I guess.
But a lot of people, street riders particularly, certainly not racers,
right?
They're more into the appearance of the thing, big, massive thing, it
looks amazing.
It looks amazing, yeah, and it looks like it's on steroids and all that.
Right.
But the guys around the corner specialized in high-performance Hondas and Civics and Accords,
right?
And they spanked him so bad that he finally decided to change it out. But it's been a lot of fun. The car's been on the road now for what, 30 30
Sounds
years
like
or
33
so.
years or so.
It's performed flawlessly. It's had no major maintenance. So despite the Flathead's supposed weaknesses,
Yeah.
it is an obsolete engine, no question.
Sure.
But it can be made to perform like a modern car. And
Yeah.
this actually does not overheat. It runs about 100 degrees over whatever it is outside.
Okay.
That's what it runs.
That's what it does.
And
Okay.
the importance is a clean block that's not cracked. Some of the overheating Flatheads were usually in trucks or heavy duty applications. They got overheated and they cracked.
Right.
Unfortunately, between the exhaust valve and the cylinder was the worst place.
Right.
And those are not really, I haven't found a permanent fix for those. I go buy
Right.
those blocks. So the idea, you want, if you want it to run cool, it has to be a clean block. And if you want to keep it running cool, keep a clean block, maintain the
Yeah.
cooling system.
Okay, right. It's all about the cooling system.
Yeah, and you notice on the Motorhead Mart Special in this,
Yeah.
the original fan was right in here, so
Right.
I run an electric fan on that, but it's
Uh-huh.
hidden in the grill on that car, so you really can't see.
No, you don't really notice unless you really look at it.
You got to really look at it, right?
Well, one more thing I just want to cover with you
Sure.
is the books that you have.
In doing this, I learned a lot and relearned, and probably relearned a lot that some of the guys in the old days knew.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of snake oil on the internet
Yeah.
and in other published books that really were supposed improvements, but they really didn't work. And there was a lot of, misinformation would be the right term.
Sure.
So the first book was this one, and
Uh-huh.
it described really the first engine that is now in my 50 Mercury. It answered the questions, what worked, and it essentially provided a formula to do an engine that would do what it did. And it was about a 250 horsepower engine.
Okay, so you documented what you did and when it worked,
Right.
and then you kind of made it into a book form for people.
Right. You can make more horsepower safer with lower compression and more boost. So there's a trade-off there in the compression ratio versus the boost and the optimum to get the horsepower you want with the fuel you're willing to run.
Okay.
And that's covered well in here.
All
So
right.
this kind of gives the basics for anybody thinking of doing one.
Okay.
And then I learned, after I got the engine dynamometer and tested that engine, that's where the information in this book came.
You apparently had more data all of a sudden.
Oh, I had a lot more data. I could flow test the Flathead.
Yeah.
I could, and in fact, I went through the flow testing on this head, what heads work, what valves work, blah, blah, blah. The engine dynamometer testing, and then in the end, put it on the drag strip.
Okay.
So where a lot of the articles and a lot of the writing on Flatheads, there's all a lot of puffery in there that they'll
Right.
say, this will do this and this will do that. Well, this thing does it, and it's documented.
Right.
So, and the asphalt never lies. That's what I tell people.
Right.
There's a lot of fudge factors you can include in dynamometer testing, and you can falsify a lot of
That's
stuff.
right.
But my partner on the dyno is a guy named Gary McGlasson Racing Engines in Albuquerque. He's a 4-class national record holder. And you don't get that by falsifying data or putting out funny data. And so he builds these $50,000 engines, and you can't command that with fake data.
No, that's right.
Because it won't do it.
It doesn't
So
work.
all the latest stuff in here, it's all color, and it includes, there's the Motorhead
There's
Mart
your car,
Special.
yeah.
And it covers all the major components and what porting works and what's necessary and what doesn't.
Oh, that's
And there's a lot of
fantastic.
historical stuff in here. And then there's 4 customers, including that described exactly, so they could see the part numbers and what the settings were and all that. But then I also found that a lot of people had inherited Flatheads. Their dad had one, or there was one in a barn.
Right.
And so they didn't know what they had or what fit what, or if it's desirable or undesirable or what to check. So that's where this book came from.
Okay.
The Identification and Rebuilder's Guide. So it's not a hot rod book per se. It's what fits what and goes year by year. And I recommend this to anybody that is dealing with a shop maybe that hasn't rebuilt any Flatheads. A lot of the owners, it makes the owner aware, and then I recommend they loan it to the shop because it makes a difference on what they use for machining datum. And
Right.
Ford did a lot of things right.
Uh-huh.
They had hardened valve seats for the exhaust in 1934.
Wow.
So a lot of shops try to upsell the customer on putting in hardened seats. They already have them. and they had hardened in intakes in 39. Ford really tried hard to use the best materials, and they used advanced concepts like 3-angle valve jobs and hardened valve seats, even in the 30s, that others didn't show up till the 50s and 60s. But one of the really things that I was impressed with as quality control, they test a completed engine, hook it up to, and each engine got this, they hooked it up to a 50 horsepower electric motor, and then they rotate the thing, and then they'd monitor the current draw on the electric motor. And when the current draw fell below a certain point, they knew it was broken in. So if you got a brand new Ford, and I've got the owner's manual for my mom's 1936, no break-in required. As far as driving on the street, it was broken in when you got it.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing? And then other things we talked about was the relieving area, or cutting out material between the valves and the cylinder. Certainly it works for increasing horsepower, and in fact a good relief job, say 1/8 of an inch deep, it follows the gasket line. It's good for about 15% really in increased flow. 15% more flows, 15% more horsepower. The factory started relieving around 1939, and they had a relief that wasn't as extensive. It was maybe 2 inches wide and maybe 80 thousandths deep between the valve area and the cylinder. But it wasn't to increase breathing, it was actually to change the stress distribution and reduce the tendency of the blocks to crack. And Ford had problem with cracked blocks and overheating, as you might guess, is
right.
Famous Flathead trademark. But they found that particularly in trucks, they tend to be overworked, overheated, and then some of them had air brakes where they introduced a cold blast of air that cracked the block.
Sudden temperature change, right?
Yeah, and so one of our members, Clarence, and I can't think of his last name, in Albuquerque, he worked for Ford before the war, he said that the factory relief was put in there not to enhance breathing capability or performance, but to reduce the tendency to crack.
Interesting.
And that's kind of a lost factoid. I have never heard that from anybody else.
I had never
but he was there.
Okay. So this is someone, okay, now is this the gentleman you're saying that worked for Ford?
He worked at Ford prior to World War II. They had a 3-angle valve job right from the get-go. And a lot of companies, major companies, didn't even discover the advantages of a 3-angle valve job until the 50s and 60s.
Right.
Ford had it in the 30s.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, so this answers a lot of questions, and
okay.
the differences in the heads and the oiling system and all that. And and I was going to say, there's my Mercury.
Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Beautiful.
It's a 50 Mercury. It has all the stock gingerbread on it. And there's the engine. It was iron heads.
Okay.
And the iron heads can be made to perform very well, but it's a dirty, nasty job to work on the iron heads. And there are some limitations, but that engine was the benchmark for the Blown Flathead book. This brought it up to date, but
okay.
Because I'm a student of these things, and I've ended up being a Flathead fanatic, I'm not trying to keep any secrets.
Right.
I'm trying to share the secrets with everybody else.
That's a wonderful gift that you give to, all kinds of people you'll never meet are going to be given a gift with you sharing the information.
Well, I appreciate really that,
great.
Barry. That was my goal. You know, what works, what doesn't work. And since there's no exotic stuff in the block there, I mean, we're talking not much more than a basic rebuild for the the short block.
Yeah, so what you're saying is it's not so exotic, it's attainable, right?
It's attainable, and the right combination of equipment makes the difference. It's like we were talking about what started me out in engineering. What works and what doesn't work, and by the way, how to do it the most economically.
Yeah, right.
And these work twice as good for half the price.
Well, you can't.
In my humble opinion, of course.
There you go.